Okay, I think this is working. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks. So I'm just gonna mute this so that I don't hear myself on YouTube. Okay, so I'm assuming that everything's working and that you can hear me. Um, and if you can't send, or if there's some kind of problem, just send me a message on the thing, on the type thing. Unfortunately, the translator couldn't make it today, and I'm using Sham's computer, and he's not here, so I'm not that familiar with it. And hopefully it works. So I'm just gonna. I think I have to just pin myself here. Okay, and we can start. So yeah, welcome everybody. Nice to see you all. So today's class is again the topic of exploring the third verse of Shakshastakam. And today is the second class. My name's Gaurasundara, for those of you who I haven't met. I live here in Madhuban, Guru Maharaj's ashram in Costa Rica, and I'll just start by saying a little Mangala Charan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Siddhantotpalasada Nityarasikam Hamsam Vilasatmakam Audaryatya Sudama Sevakadanam Vishramba Bhakti Pradam Yachna Yukti Vichakshanam Tagabido Vaishishta Shakya Sada Vandeham Tripurari Namakayatim Shri Bhakti Vedantinam Namo Mahavadannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tishe Namaha Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Bododaya Pushpavanto Chitto Shando Tamonudo Vandeham Shri Rama Krishno Abhaya Charana Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subala Priyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so the verse in discussion today is, of course, the third verse of the Shikshastakam. I think we all know it. Trinadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sada hari. And this, of course, is found in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam. I guess just a short recap of what I spoke of last week was kind of located its place in the Shikshastakam. The Shikshastakam, of course, being kind of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, one of his only written contributions, but really like a window into his own feelings towards Harinam and chanting the holy name. It's a very profound poem to study. Guru Maharaj says it should be recited daily, and its meaning contemplated over and over. So that's what we're doing, except with just one verse. But arguably, it's probably the most famous. Probably the most famous verse, and in many ways, it's very much the most important verse for sadhakas, because it's really threaded through the beginning, the middle, and the end of our practice, the non-end, the no end of our practice. It continues on into eternity, but it's very much there in the beginning, middle, end of our practice. And we find it just, kind of near the beginning of the Shakshastakam, which, very well could be, the whole Shakshastakam, like I've mentioned before, is pertinent, at every stage. Every verse is pertinent in some way at every stage. But perhaps the earlier verses are a little bit more pertinent to those of us, in the beginning stages of bhakti. So we see Mahaprabhu, he extols the glories of Sankirtan, or complete chanting, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtan. This is kind of the goal of the Shikshastakam, as it lays out kind of the path to the victory of Sankirtan. And Sankirtan, it can mean chanting kirtan in a group, but san also means complete or whole. So it's complete chanting with your whole heart, basically. Chanting with your whole heart means offenseless chanting. And he's given kind of the way to achieve that here in the third verse, and that's why it's such an important verse for us to be familiar with, and to kind of explore all the different nuances of it. So he gives that there. He says, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtana, after extolling the virtues of it, that this complete chanting with your whole heart, and being able to chant with your whole heart, free from offenses. This the kind of method to do that is given in the third verse, but this is also only done kind of in the association of devotees. Complete offenseless chanting happens in the association of devotees, and this verse, gives us some indication about how we can behave and really take advantage of being in the association of devotees. So the last class, I kind of just located its place in Shikshastakam. In the second verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started to really kind of well up with feelings of disappointment, almost, and humility, because he had listed all these glories of the holy name, and he gave even two more in the second verse, saying that it was full of all Shakti, and there was no restrictions on it. But even on top, even with that, he still had despair, because he was unable to fully relish the name. So he's kind of very much playing the role in as a sadhaka here. So he's saying, I have no taste. This is my misfortune, durdaivam, and this is kind of the place where most of us, find ourselves. So he gives the solution in this third verse that we're talking about. So that's kind of, one reason why it's a very important verse for the devotees, because it's the solution to overcoming our offenses. And our offenses, this durdaivam, this misfortune, is what's preventing us from chanting with our whole heart, Sankirtan. So I mentioned that, and then I mentioned just like a couple things about this verse that I found particularly particularly interesting, and there's many more, I'm sure, but these are kind of a few of the things that I'm going to go through in these classes. So one of them is that it runs, like I mentioned, through the beginning, middle, and end of our practice, and I'll be talking about that a bit today in this class. Last class, I wanted to also locate not just its place in the Shikshastakam, but locate its place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it's found, and emphasize its importance, because it's found 3 times in the in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that's a significant number in and of itself, but it's also that it's found in the Shikshastakam 3 times, which is, there are not very many verses that are found there that repeated that many times. So it's emphasizing the importance of the verse. So last class I got to the first location of it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this class I'm going to try and go through the second and third places where the verse is found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and maybe talk a little bit at the end about how it really runs through the beginning and middle of our practice, beginning, middle, and end of our practice, although there's no end. And in the context of that, especially in the middle of our practice, why it's an appropriate place to kind of really apply some effort in these, these devotional qualities of humility, tolerance, lack of pratishta, and offering respects to others, and of course, kirtaniya sadahari, the constant chanting of the holy name, because these are kind of like the tools, the methods that one, by which one can truly overcome offenses. The way to really truly overcome offenses, which is really kind of the work of, anishta bhajana kriya. It's really the kind of the hard work of sadhana before one gets to the top of the mountain, which Guru Maharaj has sometimes described nishta as being like the top of the mountain. There's a lot of work, although the work is not self-effort, it's grace, but to get to the top of the hill, and then once you're at the top of the hill, you can kind of take a breath and look down into the valley of love of God, and then things happen a little bit more, with a little bit more momentum. But this Trinadapi Sunichena verse gives us kind of the methods of dealing with the things that are binding us, that are holding us back. This kind of devotional culture of humility and tolerance, and of course, the kind of, I don't know if it's actually called the Sruvlakshan, but the center of the verse, which is Kirtaniya Sadahari, which is the constant chanting of the holy name, because that's the way that one clears offenses. It's not so much that being humble and being tolerant will clear offenses, because there's many people in the world who are humble and tolerant. And this is, these are universally accepted good qualities, but when you, the way to overcome offenses is by chanting the holy name. So if we have offenses, and we know that we do because we don't have taste, like Mahaprabhu describes in the second verse, then we have to deal with those offenses. And the way to do that is by constant chanting of the holy name. And the way that one can constantly chant the holy name is by cultivating the qualities of humility, tolerance, lack of pratishta, and offering respects to others. This culture of humility and tolerance allows one to chant constantly. It's very difficult to chant constantly if one is not, within this culture of those four qualities. And also, it's impossible to chant constantly too without the association of devotees, without being in sadhu sangha. And these four qualities also assist us in taking advantage of the association of devotees. So the other point that I'll eventually come to of this verse is that it's the symptoms of someone who's chanting purely, like I had mentioned, that these are really the ornaments of the devotees, these qualities. Also, this verse is nice because it relates very much to this idea of the golden rule that we find in all other religions about treating others in the same way that one would want to be treated. And it's extended, of course, but it's definitely something that I think would be very attractive and relatable. And we find it actually in all religions that are truly spiritual or ego-effacing religions. And ego-effacement really happens by displacing oneself from the center and putting another on the altar. Ultimately, it means the other with the capital O, meaning Krishna. But through humility and tolerance and respecting others, and the extension of respecting others as compassion and teaching them whatnot, this displaces ourselves from the center. This is something that's found in all religions. I think we could talk about that a little bit. And of course, I mentioned last time, it's just a very beautiful, simple definition of the religion of Sri Chaitanya. Sri Chaitanya's religion is chanting the holy name and being humble and tolerant. So it's a nice translation. And also, I think maybe in the last class, maybe talk a little bit how it's really the foundation for devotional communities, for them to a way in which they can, a context in which they can run and be maintained. That's what we're trying to do here at Madhavan, is create a sustainable devotional community that will go on, and how these qualities, these four qualities, and the ultimate fifth quality of chanting will kind of solidify and make sustainable the community, because these are kind of like the Vaishnav dealings, how one deals with with living with other Vaishnavas. Okay, so that was just kind of a recap of what I spoke of last week. And I started in the Chaitanya Charitamrita pointing out 3 places where it comes out. And, the sheer fact that it's mentioned 3 times gives emphasis to the verse. In the first place where it's given in relation to Mahaprabhu teaching the Harinam, Harinam, Harinam Eva Kevalam verse, which of course also repeats the instruction 3 times. So it's kind of like doubly reinforced in that section that, if something's repeated 3 times, it's very important. So it's a very beautiful section. I have it here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he teaches, he gives that verse. He talks a little bit how a devotee should behave in relation to the example of the tree and being tolerant and not asking for anything. He quotes the verse, and then he gives he gives another verse, a declaration really from his own mouth, which is very beautiful. That's kind of where I ended last time. So the verse, of course, that we're talking about today is Trinadapi Sunichina Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. So Prabhupada translates it as one who thinks himself lower than the grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, who does not expect personal honor yet is always prepared to give all respects to others, can very easily chant the holy name of the Lord. And then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami goes on to say, Urvabahu Karikahun Shunya Sarvaloka Namasute Ganti Parakanti Shloka. Raising my hands, I declare, everyone please hear me. String this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it on your neck for continuous remembrance. And that's kind of where I left off yesterday, because I was, not yesterday, but last class, because I was kind of talking about how it was a nice reference to our Kantimala, and talking a little bit about how these qualities are really the ornaments of the devotees. That there are external ornaments that we wear, like the Kantimala and the Sika and the Tilak, and these are all good and wonderful and very beautiful ornaments. But the ornaments of a sadhu, which is kind of what he's referring to here, is these qualities of humility, tolerance, respect, and chanting the holy name. There's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says it ends with the word sadhubhushanam, which means the ornaments of the devotees. And I'm just going to quote it for you, because these 5 qualities are the sadhubhushanam, the ornaments of the saints. And it's mentioned by Kapila Dev in the 3rd canto, Kapila Dev's teachings to his mother Devahuti. Really nice section there, but I don't have the verse memorized, but I have it here, and I'm just going to recite it because it has these 2 words in it, which is really nice. Sadhubhushanam, the ornaments of the ornaments of the sadhus. So, Titikshava Karunika Suhrida Sarvadehinam Ajata Shatra Vashanta Sadhava Sadhubhushanam. The symptoms of the sadhu are that he's tolerant, merciful, he's tolerant, merciful, friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He is peaceful, and he abides by the scriptures. And all his characteristics are sublime. So it's kind of it's a reiteration of the Trinada P verse, in that he's tolerant. The extension of tolerance being mercy. He's friendly to all living entities. So these are kind of really what the ornaments of the sadhu are. They're not, it's easy to dress up as a sadhu. I do it. You just put on, just because you put on a dhoti and a kantimala, these are external symbols, but these other symbols that are given here, these sadhu bhushana, these ornaments of the devotees, they're not easy to fake. So when you see these in someone, you can tell that that they're a sadhu. It could be even that people from other religions or other faiths have more of these qualities than those who are wearing the traditional Vaishnav ornaments. Bhaktivinoda Thakur alludes to this. So, we should be respectful. Of course, there's a distinction between that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives. I'll quote the Sanskrit a little bit later. I have it written down because it's quite long, long words. But there's a distinction between the four qualities mentioned: humility, tolerance, lack of pratishta, and offering respects to others. There's a difference between those and the last one, which is kirtaneya sada hari. So, of course, people in other religions might not be chanting in the same way that we are. But anyways, I'll go into that after. Prabhupada gives a really nice commentary to this verse, the Sadhu Bhushana verse in his Srimad Bhagavatam commentary, talking about the symptoms of the sadhu, the ornaments of the sadhu. He says he actually gives reference to other religions in that quote, mostly to Jesus, I think. But in his commentary, he references Jesus and other saints as people who embody the kind of these principles of tolerance. So we see, that these saintly ornaments are also found in other traditions: mercy, compassion, friendliness to others, and Bhaktivinoda kind of extends tolerance to compassion towards other. And Prabhupada also in his commentary, besides referencing Jesus and other traditions, remarks that the ornament of being friendly and merciful. This is, Prabhupada sometimes makes these really nice statements, like he's extending this friendliness and mercy to all living entities, and he goes into actually it means all living entities. It doesn't just mean humans, and that's just one of the nice things about Hinduism, is it really it's always seeing humans as part of as part of the collective of living beings. Most other religions tend to be quite anthropocentric, really focused on humans, but Hinduism is nice in that regard, in that it's always including the other living species, whether they be animals or plants or insects. So it's nice because he remarks that Prabhupada remarks that this ornament of being friendly to all living entities, or say in the verse that under discussion, offering respect to all living entities. When you respect someone, it's also a when you respect someone, you respect their space and the fact that they're a living entity of their own. Compassion is also extended from that quality. But anyhow, Prabhupada goes on and says, basically it doesn't just mean that he's friendly to all human beings. It means that he's friendly to all entities, even the animals, and Prabhupada says even the animals and the plant kingdoms. So he gives a nice example of Shivananda Sen there caring for the dog, as an example of that the devotee or the sadhu is friendly to all living beings, even to dogs. Other religions also have this. I don't want to say that they don't. There's Saint Francis, for example, in Christianity, and even actually the Prophet Muhammad is famous for his love of cats. He was quite fond of cats, and you can see in Islamic countries. I mean, I think Islamic countries in many ways might put some other countries to shame in terms of the way that they take care of animals. You see them taking care of cats on the street, putting out little dishes of water for birds and whatnot. I have a friend in Istanbul, and he walks around. This is very normal. He walks around with a little bag of cat food in his bag to give out whenever there's stray cats. And you see this, so it's very nice. It is there in other religions, but it's a nice thing about Hinduism often that it's extended to the other things. So the story of Shivananda Sen is worth mentioning because one, it's just it's a very charming story where you see a devotee being friendly to other living entities, and it also shows that he's respectful to all living entities. So the devotees show respect to everyone, knowing that Krishna is in the heart of everyone, and being in the heart of everyone means that their body is Krishna Mandir. It's a temple of Krishna. So the devotees show respect, to everyone. It's a very charming story, and it also emphasizes sadhu sangha. Actually, the power of sadhu sangha. So I think it's worth retelling here, just because it emphasizes those things. It emphasizes sadhu sangha, the context in which perfect chanting can take place, and it shows the kind of like compassionate and friendly dealings of the devotees. So the story basically goes, just in brief, that the devotees from Bengal had received news that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had returned back to Puri, right? I think he was in Vrindavan, and he had arrived back in Jagannath Puri. So they were really excited, and they were able to go see him in Puri, because from Navadvip to Puri is a lot easier to transverse. So, they all excitedly got together and started departing on their journey towards Jagannath Puri. And Shivananda Sain, I guess he was like the manager, so to speak, because he kind of like organized the journey, organized everything that needed to be, all the tolls that needed to be paid for, and maintained everybody on the trip, provided for their accommodations, places to stay, etc. But on the way of their journey from Navadvip to Jagannath Puri, a stray street dog joined them, and basically, surrendered to the party. Shivananda Sain accepted the dog just as any other member of the party, and because the dog had surrendered to the party, now it was his he felt very much that it was his responsibility to maintain, in the same way that he was maintaining all the other devotees. So he just saw this dog as another devotee who had joined. So they came to a place. It's real nice, It's really nice to see this friendly dealings of the devotees, even in relation to dogs. Certainly, it happens here a lot too. We see how the devotees are kind to animals. Anyways, they came to a river crossing where I guess they had to take some kind of ferry, some kind of boat, and they were bringing their dog with them. But actually, the boatman wouldn't let the dog on the boat. So Shivananda Sain paid a full fare for the dog. Normally, you would think you'd just let the dog get in, but the boatman wouldn't let him. So Shivananda Sain paid the full fare so the dog could come along. Like he wasn't going to leave the dog behind. It's kind of sad to see, actually, on the news now. You see all these people fleeing out of Ukraine, and so many of them have animals with them. It's a side of war, that's just terrible. All these animals also are suffering, and you see so many people leaving, with their cat carriers and their dogs and everything like that. So Shivananda Sain, he was willing to pay, so the dog could come along, and so he paid the full fare, and basically they would cook for the dog, just like that he would be included in the cooking, just like all of the devotees were. So, but one night, Shivananda Sain's servant, or the devotee that was in charge of cooking for the dog, forgot to feed the dog the rice, and here it would be rice and beans. We feed our dogs sometimes, but forgot to feed the dog rice, and the dog disappeared. So Shivananda Sain returned from whatever duties he was performing, and asked if the dog had been fed, and they realized that he hadn't, and that in fact the dog had run away and was missing. So Shivananda Sain was really, really distraught. He had taken kind of responsibility for this dog, and he immediately sent 10 devotees out to search for the dog, to go and find him. But unfortunately, to no avail. The devotees were unable to find the dog, and they returned, and everyone was pretty depressed. Shivananda Sain was pretty unhappy about the whole situation, so he decided to fast. Sometimes when you're unhappy, you can't eat out of despair. So partially probably out of despair and maybe feelings of guilt, Shivananda Sain fasted completely for the night. And in the morning, they looked and they still couldn't find the dog. So they continued on their way to Jagannath Puri in anxiety, and they arrived. They met with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They had darshan of Jagannath, and then they went and took rest. The following morning, they went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his quarters, I think, and so they went to have darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again, and then they saw the dog was sitting there beside Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right beside Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sitting place, and Mahaprabhu was throwing him pieces of coconut, of green coconut, and the dog was eating the coconut pulp. And it's said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling the dog, chant Hare Krishna, and the dog was chanting Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, like that. And so the devotees were totally, overwhelmed with humility and astonishment, and immediately they offered respect to the dog. They offered obeisances to this dog, this very special dog. And then the next day, nobody could find the dog again because it said that the dog had achieved the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and returned to Vaikuntha. So it's a real sweet story showing how the devotees offer respect to all other people. Prabhupada's point being that it's not just people, the devotees offer respects to all different animals and plants, and how they're a friend to all living entities. It reminds me a lot here, we had in the early days when Vrindaranya was here, I think the first time that Guru Maharaj and Vrindaranya were here, there was this really scraggly stray dog that came, white dog they named him LP, which is short for El Perro, which just means the dog. But he was a really special dog, and Vrindaranya, really, went out of her way to take care of it. And I remember when I came, seeing the way that Guru Maharaj and Vrindaranya, the affection that they had for this dog, who just kind of was just started coming and was very friendly. Vrindaranya used to have us cook rice and beans for LP. So it very much reminded me of the story of Shivananda Sain. I was thinking Vrindaranya is doing the same thing as Shivananda Sain, treating the dog in the same way. So, and this also, the story is also important because it shows the power of sadhu sangha, what this dog achieved just by being in the association of the devotees, and also what the devotees achieved by being in the association of the dog. So, all of this was just coming from that verse, Sadhava Sadhu Bhushanam, right? That these are the ornaments of the devotees, the symptoms of the sadhus, Krishnadas Kaviraj here, says one should ornament oneself with the verse of Trinadapi, just like one ornaments oneself with the Kantimala. He says, string this verse on the thread of the holy name, but I think you can also think about it, string the holy name on the thread of this verse. This is a meditation sometimes I try to do while I'm chanting japa with my japa mala, thinking what is holding these mantras together? What's holding my practice and my devotional life together, and try and kind of cultivate these qualities and see them as running through my practice. See that they're holding it together, like the string of my japa mala is holding all the beads together. And then the last verse of this section, Prabhupada translates it as, one must strictly follow the principles given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this verse. And he's referring to the Trinadapi verse. So if one simply follows in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya and the Goswamis, certainly he will achieve the ultimate goal of life, the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. And Guru Maharaj translates it. His translation is really nice. It rhymes. It says, hands raised, I declare, listen all, string this stanza on the thread of Nam and garland it around your neck. Follow this shlok on the order of the Lord, and surely Sri Krishna's feet will be your reward. So that's how this section ends. Very nice. And then, so moving on to the second time this verse is quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Let me find it here. I got that giant one-volume edition. But the second time that we find it is in the Antya Lila, chapter 6, the meeting of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Raghunath Das Goswami. I'm just going to have a sip of water. I hope the cicadas aren't too loud, but they make it that I have to basically scream to, like, speak very loudly, even just to hear myself. So I hope you can hear over them. So yeah, okay, the second time we find Trinadapi found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is in the meeting of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das arrives to Jagannath Puri after, a really rough week or 2 weeks of travel. It's a bit of an arduous journey. It's described in the text, but he arrives and has darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, falls at his feet in humility. He doesn't really. He's a bit shy at this point. He doesn't have much. He doesn't say anything per se. It's a very touching moment where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a few Raghunaths around, and he gives him to Swarup Damodar as as a, what's the word? Not as a guide, but as a mentor. He kind of puts Raghunath Das Goswami under the shelter of Swarup Damodar as kind of a mentor, and says, you're the Raghu of Swarup. So, he saw Raghunath Das's condition. He was all skinny and dirty, and from these long travels. So he gives him to the care of Swarup Damodar, knowing that he'll be well taken care of, and fed. And so they cleaned him up, and they fed Raghunath Das Goswami the remnants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for several days. And then I think for 5 days, and then on the 6th day, Raghunath Das Goswami, his renunciation, he went and started standing outside of the Lion Gate at the Jagannath Temple, and started begging alms. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard of Raghunath Das's renunciation, he was very pleased by it. And so then the following day, Raghunath Das, started to really have the desire to get some specific kind of personal instruction directly from Mahaprabhu. So he asked Swarup Damodar, and Swarup Damodar, being very soft-hearted, of course, petitioned on his behalf. Out of affection, Mahaprabhu said, although that Swarup Damodar knows everything, he knows more than I do. Out of affection for Raghunath, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him some personal instructions. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Goswami, these are his instructions. He said, do not listen to or speak gossip. Do not eat tasty food or be fashion conscious. Do not expect honor, but honor others. Constantly chant Krishna Nam and mentally serve Radha Krishna and Braj. These in brief are my instructions. From Swarup you will get the specifics. So that's there in the text, and then he goes on and recites the verse, Trinadapi Sunichena Tarori Vasahishnu Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. So he gives these instructions about, to not speak or listen to gossip, to not be fashion conscious, to not eat fancy foods, to humbly serve Radha and Krishna. And then again recites this verse that one should consider oneself lower than the straw on the street, etc. So this is all very good advice that Mahaprabhu gives. And it's kind of like as if he's like summing it all up. He gives kind of, in the narrative, he gives these instructions, and then kind of to sum it all up and distill it again into one verse, this verse is recited. And Guru Maharaj's point here in relation to this pastime, in his commentary on this verse, is that this verse is like essential to achieve prema. It's it's the road that paves the path towards prema, or the path towards prema is paved with this verse. His instructions, they're very simple. In one sense, they're very simple. They don't seem too elevated. So Guru Maharaj's point here is that, this is Raghunath Das Goswami. So he's considered to be the Prayojan Tattva Acharya, the Acharya who's writing the Acharya whose writings really illuminates or elucidates the goal of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So it's a prominent position, to say the least, and the goal is very, very high. These kind of loving pastimes of Radha and Krishna, very esoteric, very high, very misunderstood. Can be very misunderstood. But Raghunath Das Goswami is kind of the emblem of that, in that his writing illuminates that most. So he has a very high position. Prayojan, of course, means the goal, and there's Sambandha and Abhideya, and also different Goswamis have been kind of I'm not exactly sure where that comes from, but have been assigned the Sambandha Tattva Acharya. I think would probably be Sanatana Goswami, because his writing in Brihad Bhagavatamrita kind of really, his major work elucidates those kind of topics. And then I think the Abhideya Tattva Acharya is probably Rupa Goswami, because his book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, kind of gives the Abhideya the path. So Guru Maharaj's point, anyhow, in relation to this pastime with Raghunath Das is that one would expect that the Prayojan Tattva Acharya to get some kind of extremely elevated or rasic kind of teachings, but actually we get these kind of very, very simple and down to earth teachings, but actually they're not so simple. In one sense, they are very, very elevated. Like I mentioned at the beginning, none of these these verses don't apply only to one stage. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the one, I think, who showed how the verses of the Shakshastakam relate to the different stages of bhakti, but they all relate to all stages. Especially this verse, actually, this verse on humility. You find it in the extreme love and humility of the gopis. So outwardly it seems a little bit simple, but in fact it's not. It's very elevated, and it's also very very difficult to practice these things. It's easy to tolerate. It's easy to talk about humility and tolerance, but like tolerance, especially unless you have something to tolerate, it's very easy to feel oneself tolerant, or it's very easy to feel oneself humble until one's ego is under attack. And then you see that these things, they're actually not so simple. It's really like this ongoing, an ongoing process for the devotees to be introspective and we've been talking about that a bit here, to take time to be able to be introspective and be and to process these types of things. And in a devotional community, especially like living in the ashram, you don't get to choose who you live with, for one thing. So it's when you're one of the benefits of living in ashram life is that you're forced to live with people that probably you might not have chosen to live with. Like one would choose one's wife or one's children or whatnot. That's kind of like I'm sure there's cases where it's not that, but they're people of one's choosing. At the ashram, you don't get to choose that, so it's a real good place to practice tolerance. My point only being that it's easy to think oneself tolerant and humble and respectful until one's put in the fire where one actually has something to tolerate. So by teaching the verse to Raghunath Das Goswami, he makes this point clear that this is the path to prema. And Guru Maharaj says in his commentary on it that in fact Mahaprabhu said that if he were to distill all of his instructions on sadhana and sadhya tattva, so that would be the practice and the goal that's achieved by the practice. So if Mahaprabhu were able to distill all of his instructions on sadhana sattva tattva, the truth about the path and the goal, it would be this verse, this Trinadapi Sunichena verse. So it's very, very important. It's very, very simple. It's very, very, very eloquent. I think at the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj makes some comment about. It's a common aphorism or whatnot about truth that's stated concisely is very beautiful and very powerful. And this verse certainly is truth stated very concisely. It's a verse that everybody can memorize very easily. So the other thing that's interesting, the other thing that's interesting about the verse is it really gives instructions on, like Gumaraj had mentioned, it gives teachings on the sadhana. It also gives teachings on the sadhya. It's also a very nice simple definition of the religion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I think I talked about this a little bit in my last class, but we know Rupa Goswami has given a very, very clear and refined definition of bhakti being not covered, a culture of devotional service that's favorable for Krishna, for his pleasure, that's not covered by jnana or karma. And we can see some of these elements in the Trinadapi Sunichena verse, in the sense that by being humble, it means that one is not after material goods or things, or one's not after good karma. The devotees are comfortable in a humble position. Like I think Mahaprabhu says that in the previous thing where he talks about, he makes reference to the tree, that the tree never asks for anything. He says thus a Vaishnava should not ask anything from anyone else. If someone gives him something without being asked, he should accept it, but nothing comes. So, it's a nice part where by humility, we're not looking to achieve good karma, not looking to achieve material things. The tolerance of the tree, elaborated by Mahaprabhu there, not chasing after things of this world, but being content with what comes. Again, kind of not the path of karma, not the path of acquisition. So gyan, karma, anavritam. So just the path, a simple path. Not wanting admiration, honor, or veneration, amanina manadena. That means just the modest position of a servant. That's all that one in bhakti is looking for. It's not a big position. It's just to be this, to be the servant of the servant of the servant. So it's a very modest position. We're not looking to become God. We just want the position of a servant, offering all honor to others. Manadena ultimately means, we offer all honor to others, but ultimately it means we offer all honor to God. All others are venerable because God resides in the heart of everybody, but ultimately we're offering honor to the other with a capital O, God. So this idea of offering veneration to means that we are not God. We're not looking for the position of God or to merge into God. We're not interested in bhakti covered by gyan. And kirtaniya sadahari, the constant glorification of another, the constant glorification of Hari. So this is the positive and active culture of bhakti that Rupa Goswami talks about in his definition. So it's nice. It seems like a nice definition of bhakti. It seems like it kind of lines up very nicely with Rupa Goswami's verse, Jivadoy Krishnanam Sarvadam. So that's the simple definition given by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So that would be the second place where the verse is found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And now we can go on to the third quote, the third time the verse is quoted, which is, of course, in the Shakshastakam itself, which comes at the very end of the text. It's the last chapter, the Shikshastaka prayers. So the 8 prayers of instruction for Mahaprabhu. So the very end, the very conclusion, it's good to look at I think they say, look at the beginning and the end of something to know what it's about. So we find it at the very end, which is also, in a sense, the very climax of the book. Like Gumraj has talked about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has kind of achieved his goal and stepped into he's achieved his goal in this last chapter and very much in the last verse of the Shikshastakam. So he had a threefold goal given at the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he wanted to experience Radha's love, and then it's kind of more refined and explained that he wanted to experience the glory of her love, the wonderful qualities in him that she alone relishes, and the happiness of the sweetness of this love. So these were his desires, and it culminates at the very end of this book in the climax, in the Shikshastakam prayers. So he was successful and tastes the love and steps into the position of Sri Radha, into the maidservant of Sri Radha. Like the last verse of Shikshastakam is said to be spoken by Radharani himself. So it's significant, that this verse again comes at the very, very conclusion of the book. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is surrounded in this chapter, the Shikshastakam prayers at the very end. He's surrounded by his most intimate disciples, Srup Damodar Goswami and Rai Ramananda. He's reciting and relishing different verses in their meetings, including his own verses, these verses of the Shikshastakam, and he's elaborating on them, giving them the verse is quoted, and then he's through the pen of Krishnadas, he's elaborating on the verse and giving additional meaning. Throughout all the explanations, and just it's interesting when you go and you pick out the actual verses of the Shikshastakam. Usually the verse right before it, I think it's like, say there's 8 verses in the Shikshastakam. I think it's 7 verses of them. 7 of those verses, the verse prior to it, it always says, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu welled up with humility. And the word humility is used over and over and over again. Throughout all the explanations, you find this emotion of dainya, humility, invoked at the onset. So humility is there, and it runs through the whole of Mahaprabhu's recitation of his Shikshastakam. This humility it runs through the whole thing. It's there, right? It's mentioned by name right before he speaks each verse. It says, say for the second verse, it'll say something like lamentation. He's lamenting his position. Lamentation and humility awoke in him. As he spoke, his humility increased. In great humility, he again expressed, like this over and over. The various mellows of distress, humility, and lamentation awoke within him. So you find over and over again that this thread of humility. And we'll see that, maybe in another class, the next class, this quality of humility is quite unique in that it really goes. It really goes into the heights of bhakti. So it is a certain special transcendental version of humility. Humility itself occupies a very special kind of position in relation to transcendental love. I was going to give the names of Vishwanath. I'll do it later. But so we find this verse there, and right before reciting the third verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says he makes a proclamation, declares to O Srup Damodar, O Ramananda Roy, hear from me the symptoms of how one should chant the Maha Mantra. Listen to the means by which the holy name. This is how Gumraj translates. Listen to the means by which the holy name can awaken prema. And again, this third verse is given, and so here he's saying, it's the third verse. It's these two things at the same time. In one sense, it's a cultivation, and at the second time, it's the result or the stage of attainment. So it's kind of both things at one time. It gives the instructions on how one should chant, in order to be able to chant constantly. And it also, and it also from the other end gives the symptoms of one who's chanting purely. So I'll just read this the section from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, O Swarup Damodar, O Ramananda Roy, hear from me the symptoms of how one should chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to awaken very easily one's love of Krishna. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, who does not expect personal honor, but who is always prepared to give all respect to others, can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. These are the symptoms of one who chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Although he is very exalted, he thinks himself lower than the grass on the ground, and like a tree, he tolerates things in two ways. When a tree is cut down, it does not protest. Even when drying up, it does not ask for water. The tree delivers its fruits, flowers, and whatever else it possesses to anyone and everyone. It tolerates scorching heat and torrents of rain, yet it still gives shelter to others. Although a Vaishnava is the most exalted person, he is prideless and gives respect to everyone, knowing everyone to be the resting place of Krishna. If one chants the holy name of Lord Krishna in this manner, he will certainly awaken his love for Krishna's lotus feet. As Lord Chaitanya spoke in this way, his humility increased, and he began praying to Krishna that he could discharge pure devotional service. So all this repetition, it's all emphasis by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, by Mahaprabhu himself, because they keep saying and repeating over and again, pay attention here. Pay attention to this verse. Put your effort and energy into this verse. Put your intellect into this verse, because this is really the path to prem. Gumar's comments that Nishta is a stage. This is the corresponding stage to this verse is Nishta, and Gumar's comments that Nishta is a stage, where the world comes to life. It's where the world comes to life because well, actually, maybe I'll save this part for the next class, because here I'm going to start to get into the Bhagavatam, where we find the stage of Nishta described. But it's nice because we find these verses in the second chapter, and it says Tadada Jastamo Bhava Kama Loba Dayaschaya. So by chanting the holy name and getting to the stage of nishta, of steadiness, rajas and tamas and greed and lust, and these things kind of start to fade away. And these are kind of like the glasses that we're wearing, the lenses through which we're seeing the world. Sometimes I think of it as like, you see those like red glasses, you're looking through a red lens where you see the whole world as red. So at this stage, these goggles are starting to come off, and you're starting to see the world as very friendly. Excuse me. You're starting to see the world as what it is, not what it can do for you. And this is done by applying one's intellect to one's faith. Applying one's intellect into the chanting and the cultivation of these qualities. So it's really nice because by applying one's head and one's heart into the cultivation of chanting the holy name of Nam Dharma, and the ongoing culture of these qualities of humility and tolerance, the environment starts to change, and one really has a shift in perception of the environment. So the environment starts speaking, and we see that in the third verse, where the grass and the trees start speaking to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, giving advice. The environment's coming to life, and it's friendly. So it's a really nice stage, but we're coming on to an hour here, so maybe I'll save that for next class, and we can look at some instances of where the world has come to life and has come to life and spoken to the devotees. There's a real nice part in the Uddhava Gita at the end of the Bhagavatam, where the Avadut Brahmana gets all kinds of lessons from the natural world. And that's just the nice point that I guess I'll end on, that Guru Maharaj makes, is that once you get to this stage and the what is it? The filters start to come away. One sees the world as really as friendly and speaks to one and helps one and whatnot. So yeah, I'll stop there for today. So we got through basically the three places in the text where this verse is spoken, and then I guess next class I'll speak a little bit about where the stage of Nishta is found in the Bhagavatam and how it brings the world to life, and some examples about where we can learn tolerance from the trees and whatnot. So I'll end there. Thank you very much. Would anybody like to make any comments about, I don't know, their realizations about the verse, or any corrections or questions too? Make any comments about, I don't know, about the verse, or any corrections or questions too? Make any comments about, I don't know, about the verse, or any... I got like an echo going here from YouTube or something. Okay, well, it was nice speaking with you all, and I think next week is oh, there's something on fire. I think next week is Vyas Puja on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So I think this class, our continuous at looking at this third verse of the Shakshastakam will come on the following week. Okay? Okay. Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva cha Patinam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you very much.